Alright, look at that for a fuel filter. Alright guys, MTech Guy here, and today we're going to look at changing out the fuel filter on the E60 M5. Now this is a filter that often gets overlooked. You'll probably find that your car might even have the original fuel filter still in it. And it's certainly not a filter that you want changing out as often as your fuel filters or your air filters. But it's not a service item you want to overlook, because the filter itself can become built up with particles over a long period of time, and then that can inhibit the fuel flow, your fuel pressure, and ultimately it can end up with your particles maybe pushing past the filter and then ending up in your injectors. And if your injectors start getting stuck open, well then it's game over with these engines. I did do another video on that subject itself. I'll leave a link in the end of this video to that video. So the fuel filter doesn't need changing out that regularly, but you want to look at leaving it no longer than 60,000 miles, about 100,000 Ks. Okay, so let's go and take a look at what parts we've got for the job. Look at that for a fuel filter. They're having a laugh, aren't they? You can see there it incorporates the sender unit as well. So we've got the fuel filter itself, we've got the metal locking ring, we've got the plastic adapter, and then we've got the gasket for the filter too. Now these two parts here, it's likely that you won't need to replace them, but I've just bought them as cheap insurance. I don't want to get halfway through the job and find out that this breaks or this becomes damaged in any way. So for the cost of the parts, they're cheap. It just gives me some insurance that I can get the job done today. And what I'll do is I'll leave part numbers for this little lot in the description below. Now it is a good idea to get a tool like this to remove the locking ring on the fuel filter. It's better than using a screwdriver and a hammer. Now you can get the big aluminium specialist tools to remove it, but they are reasonably expensive, and I found this not a bad price on eBay. It'll do the job. Okay, so first off, before you start the job, you want to make sure that you've got less than a quarter of a tank of fuel. You don't want to be dealing with a tank full of fuel while you're pulling the filter out there, so that just makes life a bit easier and safer for you. Alright, so next up we're going to remove the battery negative cable, because we don't want the pump to try and automatically prime on us while we're removing the hoses, and also we don't want any sparks. So that's just a 10mm spanner. We'll just lay that to one side. What I normally do is just wrap it in a cloth as well, because we don't want that finding its way back over to the negative terminal there and then arcing. There we go. Okay, so that's that well covered now, and then we'll just do something similar here with the boot latch. We'll just put a cloth across the front of it there, because we don't want the boot to latch. We want to be able to get back in easy enough without any power to the car later on. Alright, so next up we want to remove the bottom portion of the rear seat, because the fuel filter lives under here. So to do that, there's just two clips, one here and one under the other side, that just hold that down. So it's just a case of grabbing up under the front there and pulling it up on both sides, and then that'll just come up and slide out. And it's reasonable size. I don't want any damage to the leather, so I'll probably just store that across the two front seats for now, just to keep it out of harm's way. So I'll just pop that up now. There we go, easy as that, and that'll slide out. Okay, so once you've got the rear seat base out the way, you're presented with this. So the fuel filter is under this side, it's under this cover here. Now what we need to do next is we'll just need to lift this carpet up out the way, and then this rubber cover that's sort of tucked underneath, we're just going to lift that up and out the way. You might find that this rubber bung is sort of located in the top there. You'll just want to pop that out first. Right, so we've got the insulation cover up out the way now. I've just propped it up out the way with something reasonably heavy there. Next job, you want to pop this out of the metal cover, and then we're going to remove these 4 10mm nuts, and then just gently lift that cover out the way, and then remove the electrical connector on the end of this cable here. Okay, so there we have it. There's the fuel filter that we're after. So first off, we'll start by removing the electrical connector here. So it's just a case of pushing this plastic tab to one side like that, and it'll just pop up off the way. easy like that. Okay, so the next step is where it can get a little bit messy. So now we've got to remove the fuel supply line, and that's under pressure at the moment. So you want to be aware of that. So what we're going to do is, there's just two plastic connectors either side, or just two pins either side, plastic ones. We're just going to squeeze them together and pull it off. Now, when you release that clip, when you release the connector, like I said, there's pressure there, and it's going to spit out fuel until that pressure is all gone in one go, and then it's likely to pour fuel out of this line just to a certain extent anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stuff some rags down here just to capture any spilt fuel. I don't want all fuel sloshing around in there and have to clean it up later on. And then also I'll just cover this connector with a rag as I release the pressure, and then once it's disconnected, I'm going to whip it off quick. And I've just got a wee old ice cream container here. I'm just going to stick it in there just to capture any fuel that's likely to drain out of there, and then we'll see how we go. Yes, I suppose it is worth mentioning, before you do release the connector, feel free to wear any eye protection if you want, but I'm just going to make sure I've got that covered with a rag as I pull it off, so I'm not going to get covered in fuel and there's no potential for it to get in my face. And the other thing is, obviously, you're going to, once that's off and once we start pulling the fuel filter out, you're going to have petrol vapours finding the way out the tank there, so obviously don't smoke, don't use any power tools, any sources of ignition. Alright, so you can see I've got the fuel line disconnected now, and what I've done is I've just put a nitrile glove finger over the end of it just to stop that dribbling any more fuel out. But it wasn't actually too bad when I took it off, but you, like I say, you do want to be cautious with that. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to get our tool and remove the metal lock-in ring for the fuel filter. So we'll unscrew that, remove that, and then the fuel filter itself is like spring-loaded. It'll just pop up a little bit itself, and then what we'll do is we'll carefully remove that out of the hole of the sheet metal, and there's a few lines to disconnect down the bottom there, but we'll look at that when we get to it. Alright, so here we are, we've got the old fuel filter out now. So as you look at it like this from the top, that will be facing the back of the car. And what I did first, the easiest one to get to was this connector here. So I undid that one first. It is quite difficult to get at all these connectors. There's 4 of them all together, because you sort of half got this pulled out of the sheet metal of the car and you're trying to squeeze your hands in there. It's quite difficult, so start with the easy ones to get to first and don't go mad. You don't want to be breaking any of these clips. I did find them quite difficult to remove because I'm assuming that this filter's been in for quite some time. So anyway, took this one off first, and then the next one, there's a connector here. So to remove that one, there's a wee plastic tab you've got to push down and then push this one off like that. It is quite difficult, but you might have to try and squeeze 2 hands in there. You can see the little lever there, so just push down on that and then it just slides off that way. You see it there, and then as you feed it out a bit further, there's just these 2 here, and you can see the colour coded, and you can't really mix up the 4 connections. And then the other thing I did notice is on the new fuel filter, this connector was undone. It might be because it's like a universal one, some models might wire up a bit differently, but this connector was undone, so I've just clipped that one together on the new one here. So that's ready to feed in, and then of course you've got a few plastic caps here to remove on your connectors also, and we'll just feed that in gently. You want to watch, you don't want to bend this metal arm here, because that's your float for your fuel level, so if you bend it one way or another you're going to get a false reading. So we'll feed that in gently now and put all the connectors on as we go. let's go and have a look. So I think what we'll do before we go any further is we'll remove the old plastic retainer there, just because I've got a new one and I don't want to get to the point where I'm tightening up and find out that it's worn or whatever. So we'll stick the new one on there, and also just pull the old gasket out here and we'll reinstall the new one before we put the new fuel filter in. Alright, we've got the new plastic ring on there and the new O-ring seal too. And the one thing you want to watch out for here is you just want to make sure that this plastic tab on the plastic locking ring is facing the front of the car, and it'll just seat in a little recess there. So just make sure that's located in its recess there and the whole thing's sat nice and snug. The O-ring's nice and flat, and we're ready to go. Okay, so we've got the new fuel filter in place here, just ready to push down. Got all the 4 connectors inside the tank there, all positively connected up. So when we push it down, we just want to make sure this wee tab here locates in the gap in the plastic retaining ring there, and then what we'll do is we'll just install that metal retaining ring just by hand, just nip it up by hand, and then we'll just pull it up with the tool afterwards, and then that's in place. Okay, so we've got the fuel filter fitted now with the metal locking ring all torqued up in place. Now when you're nipping this up, you don't need to go mad that you're going to end up stripping it out, but again, you just want to be just enough that you're compressing that rubber ring, the rubber seal, and you just give it a good nip. You'll feel it. You can be able to do it by feel, and obviously just don't go mad tightening it up. Okay, so next off, we're ready to refit our fuel supply line and then the electrical connector. So we've got the line hiding away under here. Just pull the glove off. Obviously we want the plastic cap out of the way that came with the new one. Just get this off without trying to spill any. There we go. And then the electrical connector, we're just going to sit that in place there, and as you push it down, just squeeze the clip and that'll locate it nicely. And then we'll put the metal cover on next. Okay, so that's the metal cover now back in place. Now we're ready to refit the rubber bung there, and then we'll just bring the insulation back down, tuck it under the carpet there. Okay, so we've got the rubber covers, the insulation and the carpet back in place. So next job will be to put the seat base back in, and then we'll just push it down where the 2 metal tabs are, just to click it back into place. We'll just feed the seat belt receivers through as we go. Alright, so now that the interior is all back together, we're ready to reconnect our battery. There we go, done. Okay, so we've got everything back together back there. We've got the battery reconnected. So the next job is we want to fire her up and make sure she's running all right. But before we do that, what we're going to do is just prime the line from the fuel pump, the fuel filter, to the engine, just to build that pressure up before we go cranking it, because you don't want any ear pockets coming through to the engine. It's going to cause it to run rough. It's going to be hard to start. So what we'll do is just turn the ignition to position 2, and we might do that 3 or 4 times just to build that pressure up in the fuel line there. And then we'll give it a crank over, and it might just hesitate a bit, but we'll see how we go. So here we go, here we go. So we're just priming that fuel line now. Turn it off. And again. Off. Again. We'll just do it one more time. Okay, turn her off. So that fuel line should be primed by now. So what we'll do next is we'll crank it over. Like I say, you might just see a bit of hesitation, might run rough, you might even get check engine lights, but it should just even out as long as everything's reconnected correctly with the new fuel filter layer. So we'll start her up and we'll see how we go. Beautiful, she's purring just like a V10 should. Now like I say, if you get any hesitation there and it doesn't come right, you're going to have to go back in there and make sure you've got all them fuel lines connected properly. But if you've done everything right the first time round, make sure they're all positively connected. It's worth double checking all that before you put that locking ring back in place. It should be all good to go. So I'm pretty happy with this, everything looks alright. So it looks like we're going to have to go and make a trip to the fuel station, fill her up, and then if you've just got any concerns about that seal on the top of the fuel filter there, underneath the locking ring there, the plastic ring, fill the tank right up, don't overfill it, take it for a short drive, and then just pop the back seat off again, pull the cover off, and just check it for any leaks if there's any concerns there whatsoever. Otherwise, we're all good to go. So what we'll do now is we'll just go and check out the old fuel filter, go and have a look at it. Okay, so we'll just take a look at the old fuel filter here. I don't know if you can see it on the camera there, but where the filter material actually is in here, you can see it's pretty dark looking, pretty black looking, so I'm pleased about getting that changed out when I did. And just a couple of things to watch out for when you install the new one. Just watch out for this little connector here. You can see I bent that as I was removing this old one. Oh, there it goes, popped off. Wasn't too bothered about it because it's going in the bin anyway, but yeah, just be careful of that when you put the new one in. You can see there it's all got bent and twisted up as it got caught coming out. And then with these connectors, you got 1, 2, 3, and then the awkward one down here with the flip 4. Don't worry about getting them mixed up, because the way that the pipes are sort of laid in the tank and the way that the connectors are, there's no real chance of getting them mixed up. It's all pretty straightforward, pretty obvious. So the awkward one is just this one, where you've got to slide the plastic piece back in there. It is a bit awkward, but just take your time with it, don't go mad, you don't want to be bending anything. So yeah, hope this video helped you guys out. Don't forget to give it a like if you found it interesting and useful, and check out the rest of my channel. Consider subscribing if what you see is your cup of tea. I'm MTech Guy, thanks for watching.